So let me introduce myself. I'm Alexander Loshkin. So apart from modeling urban conferences, I'm the advisor of the mayor of Novosibirsk. So in fact, some time ago, I managed to work in Perm for 3 years, and as a Perm representative, I went to one of your forums, and I was speaking about the innovations in Perm at that time. So as for the topic of this session, that is given by the discussion with Edham Shkurevich. So when we came to this conference and when we had a discussion with the mayor and the governor, we understood that the city authorities of Krasnoyarsk, they do understand that for getting this convenient environment which we were speaking about during the last plenary session, we need some tools for environment changes. And of course today in Krasnoyarsk there are almost all elements of this system presenting, but for this system to work effectively, maybe it's necessary to make it better to function, for it to function. So the master plan of the city, which was regarded as such a tool, I know that there were lots of discussion during the development of the master plan, and it changed a lot when being developed. The issue which is really interesting for me, so has it started working yet, the master plan? I mean, like a plan tool. For example, in my native city, Novosibirsk, the authorities forgot about the master plan when they just developed it. But in Perm, there is the opposite situation, and in Perm, the master plan, that is an effective tool which works, and though the governor has retired in Perm, though they still use this master plan and work with that. So it is still being developing, and it influences the architecture in the city. So that's what I'm asking you about before you start speaking. And of course, an important issue is strategic planning, strategic aim setting. Nowadays, some cities of Russia, they are on the way of the development special environment. I have already spoken about Perm, that was the first city to make the strategic master plan. Nowadays, such plans are being developed by Yekaterinburg and Ufa, and we are going to listen to our colleagues from these two cities in particular who work with these documents. And what was more unexpected for me, that last week there is such an institution of territorial development that is a big urban planning organization in Omsk. So last week they presented the strategy of the territorial development of Omsk, which was developed by them as an initiative with any municipal task set. So they just decided to do it by themselves. So, and of course, if we managed to reach this level, but anyway, one of the topical documents for the developer, these are the rules of using the territories which create the regulations for the developer itself, what they can build, what they can't, and in which limits, in which territories. And here we do as well have such regulations that are not as bad in Krasnoyarsk, but we should make them even better. For example, in Novosibirsk nowadays, we are trying to do it now. We are implementing and introducing differentiating of the territories concerning the budgets, concerning the infrastructure, and different parameters like the quantity of housing areas of apartments for the hectare, And it allows, of course, to work in a more detailed way with the city and not to have extra regulations which we can't comply with. So our Moscow colleagues from KB Strelka, they suggest to think about the tools which we can use, or which criteria which we can use to control this architecture image, to speak about architectural policy, and they say we should discuss if there should be any architectural policy in the city on the whole. So, and we'll try to speak about it as well. So let me introduce the participants of our plenary session. These are Edham Shkurevich Akbulatov, the mayor of the city Krasnoyarsk, Alexandra Katasonova, Deputy Chief of the Department of Strategic Urban Planning of the Chief Architecture of Administration in Ufa, Marcus, hello, so Marcus Appenzeller, Director and Partner of Bureau MLA Plus Holland. So Marcus is dealing with this special development nowadays of Yekaterinburg. So Thomas Stelmach, whom you know, Alexander Mikhailovich Muratov, the partner of KB Strelka, Anton Borisovich Shatalov, as a project development, the partner of the company Project Development, Alexander Vladimir Sivayev. This is ANO Agency of Strategic Initiatives in the Krasnoyarsk Krai. And Boris Borisovich Shatalov, the director of the company A2, and our colleagues from the administration of the Krai and the city itself, who take the first row as usual and help us to have this discussion and to discuss their priorities and ways out and solutions to the issues we speak about. So this is the introduction, and I'd like to give a word to Edham Shkurevich Akbulatov, the mayor of Krasnoyarsk. Good afternoon, dear participants of the conference, dear guests, dear colleagues. For me, it's really honored. It's an honor that Krasnoyarsk has become the first city hosting the urban conference. But I'd say that the topic of urban planning has been widely discussed during the Krasnoyarsk Economic Forum, during the series of Krasnoyarsk City Forums, and it's an evidence that the city community, the professional community, they are really interested in the group of investors. They'd like to see some changes, and they'd like to see some improvements in the urban planning system of our city, which is really topical, and the administration of the city takes an active part in that process. The topic of the previous section that was like improving of the city, connected with the preparation for the Winter Games, Universiade 2019. It was spoken a lot about by the governor of the Krasnoyarsk Krai, Viktor Tolokonsky. There was a separate presentation based on that. But I'd say that these conditions of preparation of the city to the Universiade, for our city, it's really important. And the topic of setting some regulations for preparation for the Universiade were really important. So that's why we made and developed the master plan for the urban planning of our city. We did it because we are going to face some disproportions while making some building constructions in preparation for that great sport event. And in this connection, it's really vital to connect these projects with some other projects important for the citizens and the guests of the citizens, for the functioning of the city itself. So that's why we should try to avoid the disproportions. And the tools for avoiding these disproportions, from my point of view, they make the basis, and these are the regulating documents, like the plan of using territories, the plan of using road communications, and the plan of using some separate territories of the cities. And I'd like to speak about some problems connected with the development of the megapolis, because big cities, that is not just a row of infrastructures, that is some combined tissue, something fixed, and that's why where we can speak about some quality of life in some separate districts or areas where people are not really satisfied with holding some events. 1 year and a half ago, the city council approved the new master plan of developing the new city. We have been working on that for several years, and we have attracted specialists from different places of our country. So, though some of the provisions of this master plan are still being discussed, and we are going to make some corrections in this plan, but these corrections won't be as big. They will be of a small character, and I suppose in November these changes, they will be approved by the city council. But anyway, again, I'd like to mention that they will be not as big. As for the master plan itself, it has been discussed a lot. In the first half of the previous year, this master plan was approved, and then different plans were approved as well. We discussed a master plan lots of times with citizens, for example, and the citizens, they spoke about the dissatisfaction they had or some problems they were worried about, and we had to explain why we could or couldn't do something. And that's why I suppose the experience of developing the master plan was introduced in the UN reports as one of the best practices of introducing urban planning in the master plans. So these practices, they spoke about the best experiences. But in fact, we developed this master plan not become on the top of the list of these ratings, but we did it to improve the quality of life. That was not a populist development. That was not a political development. That was a development which can influence the city life and the activity of some economic institutions and businesses which work in the territory of the region. So the first thing was changing the paradigm of the city development. In after-war period, so the city developed as the socialist city. The first task that was set, that was creation and working with big industries which existed then, and many of which still work. So the image was set by the post-war times, when many industries were evacuated to Krasnoyarsk during the wartime, and then they became that industrial legacy which was left in Krasnoyarsk city. So, and here we can see some analogy, because we speak about the legacy of the university, and in this case we can speak about the legacy that we had previously gained. And our task was to change this paradigm and to set the aim of changing the city from a typical Soviet industrial city into the modern megapolis, containing all the vital elements of the modern city. These are not employment facilities for people, but these are not industries, but this is education. These are cultural and public spaces for citizens, which the modern city requires. So the model of the city planning, of the urban planning, it made the traffic situation in the city even worse. Nowadays, our city, as for the traffic density, it's one of the biggest cities in the country. So we have on the top of the list there are only Moscow and Vladivostok. But then we take the third place. Of course, these transport backbones, they're not capable of providing the same facilities for citizens. And very often the city is divided into the zones which need to develop and live separately from each other. The city doesn't have an approach to the embankment or waterfront. So I can say that in many places of the city, there is only a waterfront but no embankment on the whole. So, of course, there are many industries which don't function nowadays, but they prevent from developing these spaces, these industrial spaces. This is just some list of the problems which we should have taken into account when developing a plan. And there was a decision made to emphasize the new economic development of the city. We spoke that Krasnoyarsk city is going to be still an industrial city. We don't have any perspective of becoming a tourist center. We don't have any perspective of becoming a cultural center in a national level. We can't become a center